So, I'm not sure how this is supposed to work, but I do need to help myself in many ways than one, and I just thought, why not film the whole process? Because maybe there are people like me who are also struggling and just need that little bit of a boost to feel like themselves again, or to feel like at least you're not alone. For context, hello, I'm Mina, and well, I don't even know where to start really, but I think the best way to put it is my life these days hasn't been as I expected. To give you clarity, I'm newly graduated, or should have been, to be fair. I'm not probably graduating this year. It's a long story, so maybe story for another day. But lately, this year specifically, and we're in July now, so I really mean like since January maybe, my life hasn't been going as much as I planned. I thought by this time I would be graduated from school, on my way to, I mean, I didn't think I was going to get a job because that's like praying for a miracle of sorts. I wasn't like saying I wouldn't get a job, but like I wasn't keen on that. But I did think mentally and emotionally I would be in a very different place. And I would say for a while it did feel like I was going there, and then suddenly everything just stopped working. It just felt like, when you've been carrying this thing on your chest, this feeling that you've just basically been piling up on, it felt like that. I had this burden in me that I secretly knew was real. And to be honest, it was just hard to come to terms with because there was so much. All my life, I felt like I was a fake because the way I saw the world was very different from the people around me. And eventually, I did get good at pretending that I was just like everyone else. I was good at explaining myself. In fact, I was so good that most people think I'm very emotionally intelligent. Meanwhile, it's mostly a game of guessing. I wouldn't say I was bad at understanding people. It's just, it wasn't the easiest thing for me. And in a way, the way I started to protect myself in friendships, relationships, and well, any kind of interaction really, was basically taking the back burner of what could possibly be rejection from people. I was a kind of person who would literally, by the time you're meeting me, tell you everything you need to know about me, the things you might like, the things you might not like, fun facts about me, crazy facts about me, everything, just to make sure that I had some kind of control of what a relationship looked like. And it worked very well. It worked so well that at some point I couldn't maintain that life anymore, and it was so hard for the people around me to get used to me, the person who had always been kind of emotionally aware, knew what to say, knew how to act, knew how to communicate, suddenly not knowing how to. And for me, it was traumatic because it felt like all this list of rules I had made for myself, all these plans, this way to adapt into a world that genuinely felt like I missed the memo of how the world should work. I just decided, or rather, I wouldn't say I decided, I created a plan to make me get through it, and then suddenly that plan stopped working. And it was the most disorienting thing to experience for me. I tried so hard to bring myself to this place where I could just do it again. Went for counseling, took meds, did everything, and it just kept getting worse. It started with one bad thing, and then that kind of reset my entire life. Again, story for another day. But how would I put it? I think if I had to describe the experience, it was one day just feeling like suddenly the world around me wasn't built for me, and the daunting feeling of understanding that to be a fact became so unbearable that eventually I felt like I just crashed and burned, like emotionally, that is. I started to distance myself from everyone, including my loved ones. Couldn't attend classes anymore, hence why I'm not graduating this year. Again, I'll tell the long story version of it someday, but I was so much different from the person I had built all this time, and it took a lot to come to terms with that because for the longest time I kept telling myself I was depressed and anxious, even though, to be honest, when I felt most depressed and anxious was when I was basically having to play that normal girl, and as I was accustomed to. And I thought that was the real me. I really did. And I was trying to bring her back. So I went to counseling. I did a lot of research for myself. I was always self aware, but I became abundantly aware with every single thought going on in my head, and literally would scrutinize on them and be like, what does this mean? What is this saying? How does this imply that I'm okay or not okay? And I became so good at monitoring myself to the point where I froze. I can't remember the last time I've left this house for the sake of it, like dead ass. If I'm leaving this house, it's because something is happening. I have work, which I genuinely need to do. If not, I will be dead by now. Hello. If I didn't have work, I was basically having to do something I couldn't get out of, because if I could get out of it, I was going to. It started small. It started with not having friends anymore and having to get used to that. And that was okay until every time I would try to make friends, somehow something just never went well. And at first I just thought I hadn't found the right person, until the right person became never finding anyone that really understood me. And it was weird because I would always have the most pleasant interactions with people, at least I would say so. They genuinely seemed to like being around me, but then they never called back. They never reached out again. They would sometimes, but it was only when they wanted to like hang out for their sake, not because they for example, none of them seemed to like the idea of me being self-sufficient. I remember so many people telling me, you seem like you would do very well without me in your life. And I would be very honest and say, yeah, I genuinely like your place in my life, but if you left tomorrow, I don't think I would be so miserable about it. Obviously, I would be sad, obviously, but I would not be dead to the bones, like, oh my god, this person left me. And people didn't really like feeling not needed. And in a way, I became so bad at being someone that knew how to make people feel needed, because life had made me become so self-sufficient that I genuinely couldn't learn how to rely on other people without feeling like I was leaving my heart in their hands. And every single time I've tried that, it didn't really go my way, because I didn't think the people around me knew exactly how to handle someone like me. Long story short, what that does to a person is you grow up and you get lonely, or rather you get alone. I don't think I've been very lonely in the last few months, unless whenever I'm around people and they remind me just how different. And with friends, it didn't really bother me. I still talk to my family. It was good. Then school became part of the problem. I couldn't go to school without having a panic attack. Just leaving my house felt like existential dread, especially in the mornings, because when I was going to school, I couldn't use my headphones to block out the noise. So being in rooms started to feel like the world was crumbling around me. I would find myself basically overstimulated. The light was too bright, the room was too loud, everybody felt like they were looking at me even if I genuinely knew they were not. And then I would start to cry. And because I start to cry, I kind of leave. And it happened a couple of times. I went to counseling so many times to get help. Nothing really worked. And then one day, for no reason whatsoever, I was just thinking about why I felt so different. All my life, it felt like I was lying to myself. And I guess I was having one of those deep conversations with myself where I was like, drop the max, tell me what's up. And I admitted to myself something that I had not been comfortable saying before. Could I be neurodivergent? I mean, I've said it so many times, but I never really wanted to think about it too long, because I had this narrowed expectation of what neurodivergence is, and today I found that a lot of people do as well. I thought, for example, autism looked a specific kind of way. I would say I expected every autistic person to struggle substantially with social interactions, not being able to communicate like the rest of us, not be able to talk like the rest of us. And that was my idea of what autism should look like: non-verbal, high support needing, and very overstimulating for people with it. And then in a way, I discovered that a lot of people's autism didn't look like that. It was a video I was watching on TikTok, I think early this year as well, and it was this girl who I could have never guessed was autistic. And then when she shared, I was like, first of all, that sounds a lot like someone I know. And so in helping that person figure it out, I realized there was something also called ODHD, which is like ADHD, which is kind of like an overlap of having autism and ADHD. And it kind of best suited what I would say was my life experience, because I never thought I had ADHD, even if two of my siblings look more likely to be ADHD presenting. Like, it would be a miracle if they never got, like, if they went for a diagnosis and didn't get it. Bless them, they're amazing, and they kind of adjusted well, but it was very clear they had like hype, they were very hyperactive, and I didn't resonate with them at all. In fact, it was the opposite. I had a very hyperactive mind, but my body didn't like stimulation. I got very overwhelmed with physical stimulation, to the point where if something felt physically stimulating, I would likely just avoid it altogether. And that included my siblings, bless their hearts, but they used to make me feel overstimulated until I learned how to deal with them. And I didn't think I was autistic either, because in my head I had perfected what was the social cues that I should have known. And it took a while, but I did, and in my head that obviously everyone was struggling with social cues, so that didn't mean anything. And then I found out that my anxiety, my depression, my overstimulation, my need for predictability, and at the same time the need for novelty, because I couldn't keep a routine. But I kid you not, sooner or later you're going to see, but I have so many, I can't do anything without a plan. But making a plan and following it, oh my god, that was the worst part. The plan was so fun to make. I love making plans. In fact, I can't do anything without making a plan, but then follow through with the plan was like a myth that I never lived through completing. And this things kept building up, and I started to feel like a failure of sorts, because in my head there was something I wasn't doing right. The way I thought, the way I acted, something was wrong, and I didn't know what to tell the people around me. In other ways, I was feeling very different in the way I've always seen the world, the things I believed, the things I considered right and wrong, the way I had like a sense of justice, a sense of my own perspective about the world that I would not change for anyone. Not always understanding what people meant when they said I didn't know how to play the game of life. And I was like, what does that mean? Why should I be anything but honest? In fact, I'm very bad at being anything but honest, and it just stressed me out when people always told me that there was this hidden cue about life that I wasn't good at. In fact, that usually just threw me off, and I'm like, I'm out the door. If you need me to act a certain way, I would rather just leave. Let's all go our separate ways than to pretend, because I was very bad at it. But then in experiencing, or rather in doing a lot of discovery about neurodivergence, I realized that people with ADHD, which at this point I feel like should be researched enough to be an official diagnosis, because I promise you it's nothing like ADHD or autism. That's kind of what threw me off for so long, because I wasn't quite ADHD like. My brain was hyperactive, yes. I struggled with executive dysfunction, yes. I needed novelty and couldn't keep routines, forgot things. But when I forgot things, that was the crux of things. When I forgot things, I would be so overstimulated or bothered by it so much that I would not forget about it for days to come. It would literally bother me, and I couldn't deal with it. So I was very good at not forgetting. And I was very good at pretending to be normal. My social problems, like not being able to read the room always, I learned how to tackle it by being so obsessed with human psychology that at this point, I walk around basically carrying a mini internet psychology PhD on my head, because it was natural for me. And I became very good at helping everyone around me, and that was my way of maintaining relationships, so much so that whenever I got depressed, the people around me didn't really know how to help me, because somehow in my own way I had taken away that ability from them, because they never really got to see me at my worst. Whenever I am at my worst, I shrink into a ball and basically go hide away and deal with my problems myself. And that made it so hard to tell them how I was feeling, especially when I couldn't mask anymore. they had this idea of what I was like, and I was very good at playing that part, that when it came time to show who I really was, I didn't know how to do it. And in a way, I made it so hard for them to understand me. They really try, but considering where my family is from, it's no surprise that mental health isn't really something they talk about very often. Then you have this daughter that comes and basically gives you a spreadsheet of mental health, what she thinks is wrong with her, all her struggles. The next thing I hear is go pray. And I love praying, I love God, but that was not the answer. Because for the longest time, it felt like I was just coping in a world that didn't really understand me. I can't even tell you that I'm autistic or ADHD because you need a diagnosis for that. But I can tell you that my experiences do feel a lot like it. And while I still struggle or get through the diagnostic part, I did think it was nice to share a journey of how I learned to basically build a world that finally worked for me. Learn to take off this mask that made me something I wasn't. I'm struggling with looking at the camera, but I'm not actually looking at the lens, so it's easier. But life gets hard when you don't know what is wrong with you. When you try everything and nothing feels right, and you think something is wrong with you, you need to play the game better, you need to play the game smarter, you need to be like everyone else, and you just realize you're very bad at it. No matter how hard you try, you're never going to be good at it. That's how I felt for so long. The only thing that kept me going was my little mini world, my room filled with my hobbies, my interests, which are very extensive, the things I basically did on a day-to-day basis to basically keep me in this bubble that felt safe and guarded. Those things felt very much like me, but the world outside felt like a different beast. So I kind of started to lock myself in, and in a way, I lost the ability to even step out when I wanted to. Today, my room is messy because my room oscillates between being extremely clean and messy. My relationships are on life support, let's put it that way, because I haven't been the way I've not showed up in relationships the way I've the way I used to. I didn't say the way I've been wanting to, but the way I used to. Because quite frankly, I don't even know what that was. Even before I thought about being neurodivergent, I just didn't think it was possible anymore. The more I tried, the more sad I became, the more exhausted I became with this part I had to play in life. And at some point, it became this thing that was impossible to keep up the act for. The people who loved me tried to understand, but in their own way, they're not always the best people to talk to. And whenever I got sensitive with the fear of being rejected by my loved ones, I would just hide away, because out of face, you can't reject who you can't see, can you? So it felt easier to just hide away from every big problem in my life, because it started to feel so much that I genuinely couldn't. My anxiety would not let me. Over the next few days, I'll be sharing some of the signs I noticed that might suggest neurodivergence, other things that I've experienced that have been very telling, some snippets of my life that basically get me through, and having to basically augment some of those things, like the way I spend my day, the way I deal with executive dysfunction, which is something I'm really trying to learn to deal with better, the way I communicate with people, learning to drop the mask without feeling the need to take it back on immediately, and basically share all this journey, because I'm sure there are people out there just like me who think they're sort of normal, but also know that they're just very good at pretending. And that's the secret you don't tell yourself until the secret becomes so unbearable that you just can't lie anymore. So join me on this journey if this is something that resonates with you. And if you're just interested in seeing the life of someone, well, hey, nice to meet you, and then you get to see my life. I'm not sure how this will help me or anyone else, but I do reckon that there's no harm in trying to see where I could possibly go with this, especially because there's some things in my life that might change very soon, and I would just like to try for myself one last time. because I feel like we all deserve that, and I do want to give myself this fighting chance. So that's it. Thank you for watching my video. Please subscribe if that's something you really want to do, and just I hope I see you next time.